You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth!
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth!
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
All right, welcome back, everyone. You know, while I was out over the 4th of July weekend, a writer by the name of John Cheese caught my attention. He writes for a magazine called Cracked. Older folks may remember Cracked magazine as being a competitor to Mad magazine.
It used to be a magazine.
Well, it's no longer a magazine. It's now a website.
Yeah,
exactly. So it's this website called Cracked, and, you know, great stuff up there. Cracks me up every time I go there, pardon the pun. I love the comedy that I read out there. And one of my favorite writers out there is a guy who's named, and I hope it's a pseudonym, John Cheese is his name. And he's written some of my favorite pieces, actually. He's got one called 5 Things Nobody Tells You About Being Poor that is like a page right out of my life, I'm telling you.
Oh, God, I remember that article.
Remember that article? Yeah. You know, come to think of it, the 5 ways methamphetamine can make you a new person.
Yeah.
It's another page out of my life.
Yeah.
A sad, dirty, torn page many chapters ago. But that's another great article he has out there. And another one that just made me laugh out loud called 5 Ways Television Went Crazy Since I Quit Watching in 2003. I told you that one about the Chris Hansen To Catch a Perv, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so great articles. I love this writer. So I was caught by surprise because on my blog at stash.normal.org, when someone links to my stuff, I get a track back that tells me they've linked. And I found this track back from John Cheese, a column called 5 Pro-Marijuana Arguments That Aren't Helping. And in his second point, he actually sarcastically called one of my columns a not at all retarded rebuttal to a flyer from the Scientology-backed Foundation for a Drug-Free World. And, you know, at first I was like, oh, you know me, I was going to jump right in and throw 1,000 words back at it and tear apart all his arguments and stuff. But then I realized John Cheese gets about 1 million views on his articles, and the best I've ever done is about 30,000. So maybe there's a lesson to be learned here. Maybe there's something I can pull out of this that would be positive here for the cannabis community. So let me go to his article here. It's up at crack.com and just give you some of the highlights and what he considers the 5 pro-marijuana arguments that aren't helping, because we make some of these arguments, but sometimes because we know the background of it, we know how logical it is. Coming from somebody else who's out in the square world, it sounds brand new to them, and this article, I think, gives us an idea of why some of our arguments sound so, as he said, quote, retarded, when we know they're not. So first of all, he comes out and says, quote, "God damn, are pot advocates some of the most annoying fucking people on the planet. I'm not talking about the average Joe who just wishes it were legal. Hell, those people are inching into the majority and comprise a significant portion of our own audience. I'm talking about the people who push it so hard they're just short of going door to door like Mormons. And they get so aggressive and misguided in their arguments that I'm pretty sure that they are their own worst enemy at this point." And then he shows a guy sitting there toking some herb, wearing one of those kind of like Henry Hemp hats, like a pot leaf hat.
Looks like a JDR one.
Yeah, it might have been one of the JDR. It's a May Day 1999, though, up on the top of it, so it's pretty old. And then the caption he gives it is, "I take this guy totally 100% seriously." So I get the point where he's saying,
I completely agree with him.
Yeah, I get the point of what he's saying here. Yeah. So here's what he says is the number 5 argument that is not helping, and that is taxing it will save the economy. And then he makes a links to stuff where it says, you know, in quotes, you know, legalize and tax it with all the money we'll save from enforcement and all the tax money we'll take in. It'll balance the budget. And then, of course, cites the numbers from Getman, you know, $6 billion annually and $14 billion and so on. But then he points out that considering what our debt is, like in the trillions, that it would be trying to change the orbit of the sun by shooting it with a BB gun. There's no doubt legalization would create jobs and bring in some revenue, but it's a drop in the bucket. And then he points out that by saying things like legalization will save the economy, it makes your argument sound ridiculous because it makes it sound like you don't know what you're talking about. I happen to agree with him on this point, and that's why during the Prop 19 debate, when they were saying, oh, it'll raise $1.4 billion in taxes, I kind of cringed, because it really doesn't matter how much it raises. It matters that we're locking people up for growing and using a plant. Right? Because if it were profitable to continue doing so, should we? If it were not profitable to stop doing so, should we not? Of course not. This has nothing to do with how much money would be raised. The point to be made here is that we are making zero right now. And so whatever we bring in from taxing and regulating would be more than right now. Would it balance the economy? No. Would it save the economy? No. but it would be better than what we're getting right now. That's what we need to start emphasizing in order for this point to start making sense. And the backside of that he brings up is the point about eliminating the cost of marijuana-related law enforcement, saying that, once we legalized, well, we wouldn't have to spend the money on locking people up and arresting them, investigating them, and so on. But he points out that if it's legal, well, then you have to have the regulations on it. You have to test it and inspect it. And you have to have, if people are breaking the law, not paying the taxes, you still have to lock them up. Yes, absolutely, that is true. But it is far less costly to enforce regulations, especially since a lot of the organizations that would enforce these regulations already exist, like FDA, than to have to continue locking people up and warehousing them. And that doesn't even count the ancillary costs of ruining their lives and how much lifetime income and earnings and productivity they lose because of that scarlet letter on their records. So that we need to learn to make much more present in this part of the argument, is not that there won't be costs involved in regulating and legalizing marijuana, but they will be less than what we're doing in keeping it illegal. Now, the number 4 point that John Cheese brings up here is marijuana arguments that aren't helping. We need it for cancer patients and to make paper. He even calls out Toke the Town on this one. And what his point is that you have, he talks about people being at the hemp fest, guys with dreadlocks. Here's his quote. When a perfectly healthy guy with dreadlocks and cannabis leaf t-shirts stands up next to the cancer patient and pretends the interest of the cancer patient are all he has in mind, it makes it look like both of them are full of shit. Well, here's my response to that. If you are a person who believes that everyone should be entitled to use marijuana for any reason they feel, how can you not stand up for the cancer patient? What, is the guy with the dreadlocks and the cannabis leaf t-shirt supposed to be quiet? Is he supposed to say, no, not for the cancer patient, just for me? John Cheese always found that to be the retarded argument. The point is that if cannabis is a medicine, you have to stand up for that, even if you still think cannabis is recreational. So I agree to an extent as how we present our message, but it's that whole tip of the iceberg phenomenon we talk about, where the people who have the least to lose have the most to be able to say about cannabis. Not much we can do about that. His number 3 point that says is not helping is it's good for you. And he's talking about equally silly lies in the opposite direction of the government's propaganda, things being like literally saying weed is good for you. And then he points out the studies about the THC slowing growth of tumors. And then pot advocates translated that into headlines saying smoking weed cures cancer. And again, I have to agree with John Cheese on this, that we cannot over-exaggerate the benefits of marijuana. By doing so, we've got people, again, thinking we are ridiculous here. But then John Cheese goes on and cites all sorts of NIDA and NIH and all sorts of drug warrior sites saying that 3 joints cause as much damage as 20 cigarettes to the lungs. Not true. He's saying there's studies showing it causes cancer. Not true. Saying it has your heart rate increased 20% to 100% and your risk of heart attack shoots up. Again, over-exaggerated. Pot causing panic attacks and schizophrenia, stuff we've debunked with Dr. Mitch 1.5 million times. Then, number 2 point that he brings up in arguments that aren't helping is that alcohol and tobacco are worse and they're legal. And this is where he cites my not at all retarded rebuttal. And he kind of points out that if the argument is that pot is safer than alcohol, then anything safer than alcohol should be legal. That's not the point we're making here, because he's trying to make it sound as if we're arguing for another harm to be added to society. As I've said many times, it's not a matter of adding another drug. It's recognizing this drug's already here to stay, plenty of people are using it, and more harm exists from prohibiting it than legalizing it. That's the point. And so the fact that he's bringing this up means that we are not making this point well enough. We are not strongly enough asserting that the harms exist from prohibition right now that need to be cured from legalization. And his number 1 point, when advocates say that pot is not addictive, well, this is something I have a personal issue with because, of course, the history that I have in my family with addiction. I hate the way that we throw the word addiction around. So in the sense of, is it physically addictive to the point where if you stop taking it cold turkey, it can kill you? Then no, pot is not addictive. But can it lead to a psychological dependence? Can it lead to a physical dependence? Perhaps. We see that is the smallest rate, however, of all of the illegal and legal drugs that people use to alter their mood. So is pot addictive? It depends on how you define addictive. We shouldn't be going out saying it's perfectly harmless, but as far as addiction potential goes, it's about the same level as coffee. So there's some things to learn. Remember, when people criticize our movement, take a chance to look back and see if there's things you can learn from that. We can learn from everyone, even our opponents. All right, folks, we got to go. Stay tuned for Hour 2.
This is Normal Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation.
And for those of you listening on the podcast, thanks for joining us. For Cannabis Carrie, Wiz Khalifa, Ganja John, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you next week. And until next time, take care of each other.